Hi, welcome to another talk time where we talk about all sorts of things to do with clinical hypnotherapy. I'm Meredith McCarthy, and today I have Dave Mason, who's going to be joining me as a guest. He's going to be talking about how to think like a hypnotherapist and what to say when a client sits down. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Meredith. Good to see you again.
Nice to have you here. You're someone who's packed full of wisdom, and over the years I've got to know you. You always come up with some really interesting perspectives on things, and I'm just curious about, I guess, how you journey someone in a hypnotherapy session. Where would you like to start today, Dave?
I'd like to start with talking to all the therapists listening, all the wannabe therapists, the beginners and so on. Because since you've asked me to give this talk, I've been thinking about what do I do and why do I do it and how do I know what to do? And so starting off with thinking like a therapist, the first thing as a therapist, you've got to think of is, what is hypnotherapy for? This is a fundamental question which just doesn't get addressed. And how is hypnotherapy different from any other kind of therapy? How is it different from psychotherapy? How is it different from aromatherapy? I've been thinking about it, and the answer is that the aim of hypnotherapy is to put your client into their unconscious mind space and then to join them in that space so that you can help them to change whatever's in there. And this is what distinguishes hypnotherapy from every other kind of therapy. Lots of therapy use the unconscious mind, but hypnotherapy is the only one, I think, where you join the client in their mind and help to manipulate them. And that's basically what we're trying to get to. And so from that, you can then start off, well, if that's what I want to do, I want to get into your unconscious mind. How do I do it? And this is where you and your course goes in. You teach hypnosis and so on. I'm sure you've got a definition of hypnosis. My definition is much simpler. My definition of hypnosis is that hypnosis isn't a thing. It's a process. It's the process of switching attention from the logical mind to the emotional mind. And when you're in your emotional mind, you are, quote, in hypnosis. And that's what it's about. It's a process of getting you there. How you get there is irrelevant in my view. And so once you've got them in hypnosis, you've then got to decide what therapy to use. And that's where you'll be teaching all the students various ways of doing it. But I want to step back and just come back and say, what have I learned from 25 years of working with clients, successfully, unsuccessfully, whatever? I think I've learned two main things. One is that you are not the same as me. No one is the same as me. And this is not a simple thing. This is quite a deep, it took me many, many years to realize this, that the person sitting in the chair does not think the way I think, does not believe what I believe. And the other thing that I would give to new therapists that I've learned is, don't be afraid to talk to your client. Too many beginning therapists they just want the clients lying there with their eyes shut and looking pale and almost as if they're dead, and then they talk at them. And that's the biggest mistake you can make as a therapist. You don't have to have your eyes shut in order to be able to do hypnosis. And so maybe we can do that some other time. But basically looking at, you've got a worldview and I've got a worldview. And my worldview is completely different from yours. And I think the first stage of working with clients is to realize that I have no idea what the client actually knows or thinks or feels, and I've no way of finding it out. And the client's got a unique worldview, which is based on their past, how they think, their experiences, their upbringing, all this kind of stuff. And so have I as a therapist. And so have you, and so is everyone else. And to the extent that we have rapport is about how well my worldview fits with your worldview. And we have to look at that. There's always a clash. And the main problem with this is that until I understand your worldview, I cannot do therapy. Because your behavior is caused by your child's mind trying to keep you safe. Mm-hmm. When someone is smoking, they're not smoking because they like tobacco. They're smoking because it does something for them. It takes away the thing. Their inner mind, their emotional brain believes that if I keep smoking, it'll do something good for me. And I have to understand what is it that they believe will happen for them. And so knowing the inner mind, knowing the worldview is really where you have to start. And we don't have time to go into the theory of it. But basically, everyone has between 4 and 8 core beliefs about themselves that they got from growing up. And these beliefs interact and contradict and reinforce. And you've got yours and I've got mine. And my personality is based on my set and your personality is based on your set. And when they're not very helpful beliefs, then your behavior is based on that. If your belief is that I'm no good, Mommy doesn't love me, then you're going to spend the rest of your life either affirming that or trying to do things against it. These things all drive us. And so the first stage then is to consider what is your client's worldview, but more importantly, what is your worldview? How do I find out what I think, what I know, what I believe? How do I stop interfering with the client's worldview by trying to impose my worldview? And that really is the essence of good therapy. The therapist has to get out the way. Mm. We have to do the work without impinging upon the beliefs and feelings of the person we're working with. And so I'll go through that later, but that's basically what we're trying to do.
Nice. So, I just want to add to that, one of the things that I really reinforce every single training session, in fact, is the client has the answer and they know what's got them to where they are. And they also have a deeper understanding than you will ever have as a therapist looking from one perspective of what's really going on here. And I think you said it before about that rapport, having the right trust to hold space for the client and guide them through a process that can effectively help them to find the answer, I think is a big key part of successful therapy.
I agree with that. We might be able to talk about rapport later on. But the thing is that as a therapist, you need to find out what the other person's worldview is, and you need to find out what your worldview is. And so how you find out what the other person's worldview is about how you listen. And the single greatest skill in therapy is listening, my opinion. And the second greatest skill is talking. You have to learn how to talk to that other person's child. And that's what I want to look at next. The main problem is that given a person's worldview, every single person who sits in your chair is going to lie to you, without exception. They're going to lie because their worldview is not functioning properly. That's why they're in your chair. And they've got something about themselves that they want fixed. And they're not going to tell you the truth about it. What they're going to give you is they're going to tell you something that's socially acceptable, something that makes sense. They're not going to tell you about this terrifying secret that they've got, that they believe that they're basically flawed, because that's not socially acceptable. What they are going to tell you is that I had a perfect childhood. I'm sure you get that. Tell me about growing up. I had a lovely childhood. It was all wonderful. And I'm sitting in your chair because of that. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Causation has often happened many, many moons ago. And
Of course.
again, the catch up of how it's manifested, that's where it gets to saturation point and they seek help. But yeah, many people are in denial, and sometimes some of that truth can be too hard for the even conscious mind to even contemplate that that could be true. So even if you ask them a question and they actually on a conscious level think they're honestly speaking to you from a position, they've probably distorted, deleted and generalized to protect themselves at some point with that memory. Yeah.
Everyone knows that everyone is wearing a mask all day in every situation. I am, you are, everyone is. And most people are just pretending. They spend their whole life pretending it is okay. We only get the people who hurt enough to want to go into therapy.
Yes.
But there's a vast amount out there of people you can tell. And so what they do is they miss out bits of the story. They won't tell you things because they're ashamed of them. If you're ashamed, it means you're afraid of being rejected. They're guilty. They've got this secret. They think that everyone knows. They're feeling they're judged. They're full of anxiety. So I start off from a position that I am not going to get the truth at the surface. I have to start digging. And so how you get to the truth depends on how you listen. And that's what beginner therapists have to walk about. They've got to start off by thinking it's all about listening. And they've got to look, they've got to listen with their eyes and listen with their ears. And what you're looking for is when your client sits in the chair, the session actually started 10 minutes before. Because the client was coming up there in the car, they're going over in the head what they're going to talk about. What am I going to say? What's acceptable? I've got to feel awful. They're working all the way through this stuff. And so you can tell a lot about the client by how they park their car. If they park right up doors, if they turn up 20 minutes early, they've got anxiety. If they turn up 10 minutes late, they've got a different kind of anxiety. If they park right in the middle of the place, they don't care about anyone else. If they carefully put it in the furthest corner, they've got low self-esteem. You can actually tell a great deal. And when a client comes into me and we do the hello, how are you? I'm actually working. I'm trying to find out as much as I can about that client. And so when you look at that, when they sit down, what I'm looking at, what is your hair like? Someone with ragged wild hair tells you that they have low self-esteem, they don't care about themselves, they're not interested in what I think, what anyone else thinks. Someone who's beautifully coiffed, like they've just come out of a salon, has got self-esteem issues because they have to present this facade because inside they don't feel that way at all. Now look at the fingernails. Anyone bitten fingernails has got chronic anxiety or nicotine stains in their fingers. You've got to look at what they're wearing. Do they care about how their appearance? Are they dressed up in goth and saying, well, to hell with you, I'm as good as anybody, which lets you know that they feel terrible inside? Are they covered in tattoos and piercings? All of these are straightforward indicators. As the NLP people say, you cannot not communicate. And as therapists, we have to pay attention to what the client is saying with their body, with their clothes, with their attitude, with how they sit. You've also got to actually look at the client. What is their behavior? Has this guy got tics? Is he twitching away? Are they restless in the chair? Is his knees bouncing up and down? All of these are signs of anxiety and uncomfortableness. And you're going to start digging into that. And so everything about the client as they present is a way of dealing with it. In my office, I've got 2 chairs, and all the anxious clients will come in and either sit in the smallest chair or ask nervously, which one do I sit in? they're communicating their inner feelings to you if you want to listen to it. That's a way of doing it. And so when it comes to actual listening, the real skill in therapy is listening to people's words. But you also have to listen to their voice, to their tone, how they say something. And when they've got their words, they're going to tell you what you're looking for is anything that about their beliefs, about their behavior, about their emotions. And the way to tell emotions is to listen to the voice change. And when they suddenly say, well, my sister left me, you hear the change in the voice. They've actually gone into trance at that point. Their emotions are coming out and taking over, and their whole body is reacting to being into the unconscious mind. And so they've gone into hypnosis for you. And if you just lift that up and say, perhaps you could say a bit more about your sister. What else about that sister? How did you feel when you just said that? And your session's underway.
Yeah.
And it's really a case of listening very carefully to people, how they say things. They will tell you about emotions. They'll say, oh, my sister's a pain in the neck. That's not a metaphor. That's real. That's exactly how they feel. And if you say, point to where it is, as soon as they do that, they're in trance. You can say, I can't stop smoking. It's like this I have this block. Tell me about the block. And so on.
I often talk about this to my students around conversational hypnosis and how important that is. Because, you know, when you start to inquire and those layers start to kind of shine through, there are always opportunities for also reframing, you know, helping that client to be challenged about that belief that they've been holding all of that time. And what you were describing about, you know, observing how they park and how they sit and what they're wearing and all of those things, that comes into sensory acuity. You know, we need to be very good at reading the room, at noticing the things that are nonverbal cues. So really amazing points there, Dave. Yeah.
Well, that going back to my introduction, that's because the therapist gets in the way. If you're all wound up and you don't see this stuff, you don't react to it. Or if someone walks in with covered in tattoos, you say, God, this person's worthless and trash. This therapy's over. You've imposed your own view on what they should be. And it doesn't even have to be as rampant as that. I'll explain later on. But it has to be an awareness of you are reacting to your client. And if you're reacting, you don't see what they're actually saying. And you don't hear what they're actually saying. To an extent, you have to try and become bland and invisible and just absorb. And as you said, a sensory acuity, it's what it's all about. But you have to be open to it.
I think
unfortunately, beginners are too worried.
What I see often is people pre-planning for a person they've never met yet of how they're going to work with them. You just can't. You have to actually meet the person and work with what you have right in front of you. And I think that's a really important part of that therapeutic relationship. Is being present with the client, not being, 100 steps forward from where the client currently is.
Again, it comes back to the therapist. I'll talk about it later on, but you don't want to say, I'm the guru, I know everything. You're privileged to come and see me, which is what a lot of therapists regulate. They just project that. And my own doctor, you go in, the receptionist sits there and says, Doctor, we'll see you now. You mean doctor? I mean, they're doctor. What they're saying, they've put themselves into parent mode and they're just treating everyone as children who will have to go and see the guru. And you're lucky to do that. And it's very hard to get out of that habit. But all of this talking, as you said, you've got to start to build rapport. Because I believe that the lesson that I'm trying to get across is you have to have insight before therapy. You can't do anything, I believe, until you actually understand what your client's problem is. Not what you think it is, not what he said it is, what it actually is. I had a man day before yesterday who came in and said, I just want you to teach me how to care less, so I don't care what people think about me. And I'm always wanting to know. And that wasn't his problem. If I'd focused on care, we wouldn't have got there. What his problem was, he was desperately anxious that he wasn't going to get rejected and ignored and overlooked. And so he clung to people constantly, which was what he sanitized as, I am caring for them. You're not. And you got to go down multiple levels to get there and actually discover why people are doing things. And so it's all about the conversational bit. And what I always think, you've got to listen. Then having listened, you then clarify, do I understand you correctly? Is this what you got? And then you will repeat it, summarize it, reflect it. You're trying to do everything for the client. A rapport is very easily made, in my opinion. All you have to do is to be intensely interested in the other person, every aspect of it, everything they do, everything they say. They go, wow, that's fascinating, isn't that great? And you will get rapport within 90 seconds because you're just showing, you are my absolute focus. This is amazing. And to do that, you actually have to do it. You have to be utterly focused on them and not thinking about lunch or what am I going to do next or whatever. And
I just want to add something to that, how important that is for the client's experience. Because in the modern world we live in, very rarely does someone get full attention from someone. It is very, very rare. And when you can hold space and actually properly hear that person and they feel heard, they feel seen, that by itself is very healing. Even just that alone can be extremely
amazing, as part of my therapy, just as an aside, I always make sure that I have a part of the therapy session in which I make someone say to them, none of this was your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You did the best you could with what you had, and no one could expect more than that, and then go on. And many people say, that's the most powerful thing anyone's ever said to me.
Yeah.
We don't appreciate how empty and lonely many of our clients feel. They've never had that said in their life.
Words of affirmation, of kind regard. Yeah.
And so the whole point of the reflection, summarizing, repetition is to let them know, yes, Meredith, I'm listening to you. I know what you said. This is what you said, isn't it? And then I say, and what else? What else about this and this and this? And they will open up and keep going. And usually at that point, you'll see their eyes go up and they start thinking, oh yeah, no, well, actually, she also said this to me and she did this. And, and when I was at school, and they've gone, they're in trance. They're actually away with the fairies. And the trick to therapy, the kind I do, is staying with them. Never do anything that would jolt them out of that state. And so I have a rule that I never say I. I never say, I wonder what you mean by that. I say, perhaps you could say more about that. I never say, I think you should stop smoking. You should say, what do you think about stopping smoking? Yeah. It's just never use the word I, because then you're pushing the therapist into their world. They should forget you're there and they're just hearing this voice saying, I wonder if there's anything else you haven't thought of. I wonder, and on it goes. And it's just that fact that you're joining them in where they are. And basically what you get pure rapport by joining them in their worldview. To the extent that you can forget about your own and slide into theirs is, I think, what makes it successful or not.
Yeah. One of the rolling questions that I might ask in line with that is, what would you like to change? What would it be like if it was all fixed? You know, that person to begin to take ownership and charge of what that needs to be for them is a powerful thing. As soon as the a practitioner gets into their, have you tried, and they go into solution focused, sort of telling the client what they should do or could do, we can get into trouble, I think, of stealing that client's ability to self-actualize, to really find their authentic answer, their authentic space that they need to create for themselves.
You've touched on a very important point. I never give advice unless I'm asked directly for advice, because by giving advice as a figure of authority, I'm actually taking away the client's agency. Even if it's good advice, they didn't do it. I told them what to do, and the next time they got a problem, they'll come back to me. I have to empower them. I have to get them thinking that this is how I do it. I can work this through. I can do this. And if you give advice, if you help people, if you try to take over, then you're actually working against them. And I say, it's very hard not to do, but you really have to not give advice to people, no matter how much they want. But to get on the other, I don't ask clients what you just said about what else do you want, because that focuses clients on the behavior that they want to have. There's nothing wrong with that, but I believe that we have to go much further. We have to go much deeper and say, why are you doing that behavior? And this comes into the area that I specialize in, and this is about how you speak as opposed to how you listen. And how you speak is all about clean language. Clean language is about trying to understand how other people see the world. If someone is climbing Mount Everest and they get to the top and they're standing there waving the flag, what he's really saying is, Mummy, can you see me now? If someone becomes the commander of a nuclear submarine and the most ferocious weapon in the world, what he's really saying is, Daddy, is this good enough? Nobody wants to climb Mount Everest. What they want is to feel good about themselves. And so whenever a client tells me what they want, my first question is, what are you trying to get away from? If someone says, I love hiking, I go hiking all the time, my first thought is, why do you need the solitude? Why can't you get on in a crowded room? Why do you need to do hiking? What are you hiding from? And if you think about your clients that way, you will get insights into what their behavior actually is about, not what they say it's about. Because very often they don't know what it's about. They will tell you with great sincerity what they think, but they don't actually know their own behavior because it's buried away in their childhood somewhere. And so the therapy is a case of identifying the behavior and then asking, why do you do that behavior? And they say to you, I hate my sister. Why do you hate your sister? Because she's just a mean bitch. Why do you think she's that? Because she always deals with that. Why does she do that? How do you feel about it? How does that bother me? And within 4, 5 or 6 whys, you'll get to the point where they'll say, well, no, she just is. That's it. She's horrible. And at that point, you can do the therapy because you've taken away all the behaviors and you've reached the core belief. And you say, why can't you deal with your sister? And the answer is, because I'm not good enough. She's always been better than me. She's always prettier than me. She's always stronger than me. She gets what she wants. I have to do it. And that's when you can start the therapy. It is, why do you feel that way? What would you need to do that? Depending on your particular brand of therapy. In my case, I do metaphor therapy. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And we go off and change it. But it's this process of getting rapport, understanding them, going into their world, and then leading them through their own world to say what is there. And it comes back to not intruding into their world. And everything we do reflects our personality. The way you speak, the way I speak, the way everything happens. And so when a client comes in and sits down in your chair and you say, "Oh, good day, how can I help you?" That's a terrible thing to say. What you're implying is that they need help and that you're going to be the one to give it. That they're just a child sitting in your chair. How can I help you? Just ask and it'll be magically done. Or if you say, what seems to be the problem? You're implying they don't know the problem and you think there's a problem, but I know better. It's all about the therapist. If you say, tell me why you're here, you say, well, I'm a superior being. I can fix whatever you come with. It starts an immediate power incline that I've got this. And that's what clean language is about. It's about taking away the authority level of saying, wow, I wonder what you're in for. I wonder what you want. And so what I say to my clients is, what would you like to have happen? Nothing about me. It's all about what do you want to have happen? I don't assume anything. I don't say anything. Even if they say, I'm here for smoking, I say, what would you like to have happen? Because frequently the smoking is a symptom of something else. And a surprising portion of clients look stunned when I ask that. They say, oh, I never thought of it that way. They're all so used to telling their story and going through their routines that they don't actually think, what do I want?
Mm.
And if you can do that, and they'll say, well, I want to stop smoking. And my next question in clean language is, well, why don't you? I'm interested. I don't know. I have no answers. I'm just, tell me why you don't smoke. And then they'll say something like, I haven't got any willpower, or it's a bad habit, or I know I can't stop. And all of those are excellent ways in. If the person says, I need more willpower, what they're telling you is that they don't believe they can do it. Their problem is a lack of belief in themselves.
Mm.
If they say, I've got a habit, what they believe is that they're unable to change, that they don't have the inner fortitude to deal with this. If they tell you that I can't do it, what they're basically saying is I'm a loser and it's hopeless and I don't know what to do and I want you to get a bag of fairy dust and throw it over me and it'll be fine and I'll go home. But you get to these things by asking very clean questions. And then if they say, for example, it's a bad habit, you say, well, what would be the worst, most difficult cigarette to give up for you? And they'll have to go inside and think about all the smoking when they do it.
Mm.
And they'll tell you one. And then you say, what do you do just before you take that cigarette? What goes through your mind?
Mm.
And it's just an intense, dedicated interest in what do you think? Who are you? And what I'm actually looking for is how do you feel? Tell me how you feel about cigarettes. And I'll say, well, so suppose you never had another cigarette in your life. What would that be like for you? And they'll say, I feel lonely. I wouldn't know what to do. And off you go, lonely. You'd feel lonely. So smoking is to help you with these feelings of loneliness. Summarizing, rephrasing, reflecting. What is lonely like for you? Can you think of a time when you were lonely? And you notice my voice changed there. We just go straight into it. We're into talking directly to the child inside. Tell me about that little boy who was lonely. Can you remember that? Where was he? The kitchen, in his bedroom? And they've gone inside, they're entranced, they're back there, and off you go with whatever form of therapy you want to do.
Yeah.
And that's basically how I think about things. But every person who comes into your room came into this world perfect,
Hmm.
just like every other child. And they got abused and programmed and helped and hurt and all the rest of it. And it made them who they are. But more importantly, it gave them a set of beliefs about themselves. And these beliefs are very hard to shift. They are core beliefs about, I have to be perfect. I'll never be any good. Nobody will like me. Or I can learn everything. I'm good with money. I can get on with anybody. Depends what the belief is.
Mm.
And we get all the negative ones because those are the ones, and your behavior reflects your beliefs.
Mm.
And so my approach to therapy is to, what do you believe? And I just keep asking until I get an answer.
Nice.
And I don't let clients tell me stories and all this kind of stuff. It just gets in the way.
Mm.
They've rehearsed these forever, and they know what the story, they know the payoff. And it's, oh, and I did this and she did that. No.
Nice.
I usually stop them and say, tell me what you feel. And people are not used to a very direct approach of, what do you feel?
Mm.
And it's quite surprising to them. They say, oh, I never thought that before. And the other great thing about rapport is when you really get it, the thing at the end is people say, I know, I've never told anybody that before. And that's when you know you really got in there.
Mm.
That they're actually letting it go.
Trust is huge, and having someone just once in their entire life hear the honest part come through again is a relief for many, because they've been carrying that burden for such a long time. And I think that that is a big part of how we hold space for people, because even if we finish a session and we can't see the immediate results yet, right, they'll go away, and that interaction will stay with them for quite some time. It will keep processing. And then, of course, behaviours shift.
That's right. When you change their beliefs, their behavior will change.
Yeah.
And this is my brand of therapy is metaphor therapy. And I do a lot of long 40-minute metaphors in which people cross bridges, climb over walls, so on. And all of this metaphoric stuff, they've been in their brain thinking about it. And they say, well, I don't feel very different. But over the weeks and months to come, the first time they come up against a barrier of some sort, they say, no, I know how to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll just push it over, whatever they did in their dream, which is basically what we're doing. I'm implanting false memories into people, memories of strength and ability and able to deal with things. And that then becomes who they are.
I often talk to my clients, and I sort of say, I'm a bit like a dream walker. I'm walking through a dream sequence with you, helping to guide you through, but you're the one with the answers. And that's really important, that they have a sense of powerfulness in their own right to decide what happens next, and that you're not getting in the way, like you say, as a therapist, with thinking that you know all about them, which you don't. You couldn't. Even they don't always know.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many hidden aspects to yourself, let alone thinking you know everything about someone else.
Yeah. And again, when you start exploring these things with your client, the reaction is, oh, I never thought of that. They just don't understand their own behavior until I point out that you're doing this because you believe that. And they're saying, oh, now I should do it. And, oh, that explains a lot. And as you said, it's a journey of self-revelation. They suddenly realize it makes sense of their behavior. And the great thing is, I say to them, you now have an option. Even if you don't do anything, you know you could do it.
So for those folks out there that are tuning in, and maybe they are a hypnotherapist, maybe they're just thinking about hypnotherapy, what would be the most important advice you could give them out there that you would like them to kind of contemplate or think about or be aware of?
I think the most telling advice is it's never too late to have a good childhood. Why don't you just fix it? Why put up with this stuff? Life is too short. You only get one life. It's not a rehearsal. Walking around racked with guilt or feeling bad because of something mummy said 50 years ago. Why waste your life? Do it now. Go and get some therapy. Therapy is not a cost, it's an investment. It'll pay back 1,000-fold. And I see people walking around who clearly need some help, and they know it, and they know what to do, and they won't do it. Out of what? Embarrassment, fear, that I will think badly of them. It's such a waste. People waste large parts of their life and they don't have to.
That's so true.
You know, it's there are many things about therapy that puzzle me, but that's kind of one of them, the second most one.
We don't have to suffer, like, you know, that's important.
Do something about it.
Thank you, Dave, for spending some time this afternoon to talk about, I guess, what we both feel passionate about, because I know that this is, you know, a big thing that you're involved in the community, in the NZAPH and so on. So thank you again for your pearls of wisdom. If you want to check out Dave, I'll put the link to his website below. So if you want to do some metaphor work with Dave, he does Zoom sessions as well as in person in Wellington, eh?
Yep. Very much so. Yeah.
Excellent.
I love challenges.
Nice. Thank you, Dave.
I find people absolutely fascinating. Okay, Meredith, thank you for that.
That's all right. So I hope you enjoyed that from Dave Mason. It's really nice to hear how different therapists work. And if you are interested in training to become a clinical hypnotherapist, you can check out our website, nzach.ac.nz, and you can find out all about becoming a clinical hypnotherapist. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll see you next week with another talk time. We always put out one every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. New Zealand time, so I hope you tuned in. Bye.